topic of today, how to confidently lead discovery calls that convert the right clients, filter out the wrong ones. I never want you to hop on a call and then realize halfway through that the client's not a good fit, or let alone sign the client and figure out that they're a nightmare. So these questions start to allow us to know the business, know the client, understand their personality, and really bring them out of their shell during the call. A strong discovery call will save you time in the future. It saves you time when you're creating the engagement letter. It saves you time during onboarding, but it also starts to attract the right clients, because during your process, you're going to filter out the clients who are like, I want to pay $100 for a whole year cleanup with 3 accounts, and I'm not going to give you all the information, and you're going to get in, you're going to find out that I also had a credit card, all for $100, not a month, a year. Like, we don't want those clients per se. And it's going to help you position yourself as a trusted expert in the group. I think Megan was finally able to join. There she is.
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome, Megan. The reason I love talking about this topic is when we show up with a plan, when we show up with, hey, we're going to command this meeting and use it as an opportunity to really understand their business, understand if we're a good fit for them. We actually start to become a trusted advisor. We become their expert during that call. And I was listening to one of our coaches this morning. She was saying that she had a client reach out to her, call it 6 months ago. It was sometime over the summer, just reached back out and said, hey, I really liked you. When we talked, I need to circle back to this. And she's positioning herself as an expert when they first met. And so you really knew what you're talking about. Can you help me clean up 2024? And she's like, yeah, great. Here's the price. But then he turned around with all the disrespect and can you also do 2023 in that same quote? And she's, remember how you just said that you came back to me because you felt like you were confident in my services there. So it really helps you have those conversations and know whether or not you want to work with the client. I'm going to pause there real quick and answer a couple of questions that came through. Teresa says, I've worked as a VA for about 5 years and I'm transitioning into bookkeeping only as the focus. So I need to transition my focus on discovery calls and interested in learning more about how to structure those calls. Absolutely what we're going to do today. And then do you ever have them fill out a questionnaire or anything prior to discovery calls? I have seen bookkeepers do a wide variety of things. For me, I actually have them fill out a couple of questions. So when they schedule the call, you can have some questions there. And then a lot of times, one of the questions is to go ahead and give me accountant access to their QuickBooks file so I can look at it before the call. That allows me to see from my perspective, where are they at, what's been done, what hasn't been done, just overall, what is it looking like from a blind eye versus them telling me, oh yeah, it's reconciled through December 2024. I'm good to go. And then if I get in and find out what you mean by reconciling isn't what I mean by reconciling. Does that make sense? So there's that. And then Bonnie, one of our coaches, has a really long, in-depth questionnaire that they have to fill out. And one of the reasons she does that is because she has learned she doesn't want clients that are not tech savvy. And so if they're able to fill out the form, if they're willing to sit there for the 10 minutes it might take to fill that out, they're a good fit. So for her, it weeds them out. For me, accountant access, if they don't want to give me accountant access, might start to weed them out. Sometimes it's that they don't have QBO access and they note that. So I already know I'm going to get to set them up as in QuickBooks Online, and that's a benefit for me. Okay. Megan, do you have a questionnaire?
So not really. There's basic questions like what type of business, what services are you looking for, stuff like that I might have my Calendly set up to ask. But outside of that, I don't. I do get accountant access when I'm on the call with them to be able to quote and stuff, but I usually just ask everything whenever I get on the call with them to learn more about their business.
For me, similar, Megan, this might be similar to you. Let me know. Speed of the call. I do not want them to delay getting on that call or having a reason to no-show that call. For me, I'm confident enough in the questions that I'm asking and the services that I provide that I can typically sell myself. So, and if they're wanting bookkeeping, like I'm going to know in that first 15 minutes, how serious are they about signing? Like how serious is their business? How serious are they? Are they desperate for a bookkeeper? Where are they at? None of that impacts my quoting because I quote by a system. And I just saw a question about, are you quoting too high? Are you not? And Anna, I'm going to talk to you more about this too. But when we have, last week, I referred to like equal weights and measures. So if you haven't listened to that, you can, and it was just a high level, but feel free to go listen to that podcast from last week. When we have consistent quotes and we know we're confident in the quote, so if we don't have a quoting system that makes us confident that we quoted them correctly, we're going to have this nagging question in the back of our head. Did I quote too high? Oh man, what if I quoted $100 more? Would they have said yes? It takes that out of it. It becomes the service that you offer and it's a yes or no because you know the value. Your first discovery call sets the expectations of the whole client relationship because it starts to establish your authority. If you show up like, oh, tell me about your business. What would you like to pay for your bookkeeping? $200? Great. Here's an engagement letter. $200 must be what it is. You're not going to show up as very confident in just your worth as a bookkeeper. If you show up as, oh yeah, this is easy. I just do data entry. Not a big deal. You're also not going to show up as someone with authority because keep in mind, bookkeepers have evolved, and we've done a podcast on this too. Bookkeepers have evolved so much that they're no longer just data entry. We are checking their tax returns, making sure that their tax preparers have recorded their assets that they purchased during the year. I don't know how many tax returns I've seen either with students or myself where assets just aren't recorded on the tax return. That means they're missing out on that expense for those assets because they're not on the P&L. So they're not an expense up front. The IRS doesn't want them. If you buy a $100,000 truck, they don't want you to expense $100,000 that year. They want you to divide it out over the life of the vehicle. And so if they're not capturing that, if it's not on the balance sheet, if we're not reconciling the balance sheet, they're missing out on that. So a good bookkeeper knows the ins and outs of the financial statements and how they work together and what that means for tax seasons. And if you're just getting started, you can learn that. A good discovery call is going to ensure that they're a good fit for you. So if you get a client, like I know there are clients that I don't want, and they're going to give me those tips and insights about either their business, how they're operating, that will tell me, yeah, this is a really good client for outsourced bookkeeping, which is what I do. Or, hey, you need to hire an in-house person because some of the stuff that you're wanting me to do, I can't do. Or they're going to tell you, hey, I want you to come into my office 3 times a week. Maybe that's great for you. Maybe it's a deal breaker. You want to find out those things. And so it saves you time. Like you don't want to send out an engagement letter and then say, okay, when you're coming into the office because you didn't find out that was the client's expectation. And it builds confidence. So like I've talked before, like as we talk to clients, we have this jar. In this jar, we put in Goodwill. That Goodwill starts in our marketing, where we're building trust in our marketing or in our referrals. So the quality of people, our referral partners that are sending us clients, that builds trust because we're getting the benefit of their goodwill. But that discovery call also adds to that bucket of goodwill. We don't really want to take goodwill out, but sometimes that happens. Oh yeah, I asked for that document twice. I'm so sorry. I see where you uploaded it now. That takes a little bit of goodwill out, right? Can you not keep this straight? And that happens. But like you want the savings account of goodwill to be able to pull out of should glitches happen. Okay. I'm going to try to keep up with questions as we go. When they ask how many days can you give us a week, is that a sign they need an in-house bookkeeper? Maybe, but not necessarily. I have a client who they don't need an in-house bookkeeper, but they're some time sensitive transactions. So we have time sensitive payroll and we have time sensitive invoices. So I would take that question and I would find out more. Tell me more about that. Sometimes they've had a really bad experience with a bookkeeper who talked to them twice a year and never showed up for their books, right? So now they're like, okay, I'm going to over control the situation because I got burned by this other bookkeeper. And we're in an odd space, right? We're in this odd freelance space, and some bookkeepers show up and pursue excellence in their business. Other bookkeepers have been fed this lie that it's an easy stay at home, do no work, and collect a paycheck type of business. And it can be closer to that than not, but we still have to learn the skill, and then we have to provide the service. So you still have to provide the service and ensure it goes out with quality and care and just being ethical as a business owner. I would follow that up with Anna, really getting to understand why they need those days, because it might just be like, for my client, when they came on, I think they were thinking very much like, we're going to hire you as an employee contractor. But I was able to earn that expert trust right off the bat. And I set the boundaries and I said, okay, we need to make some changes to how your payroll process is run in order for me to do it. I need an extra 24 hours in this, and you're giving me like same day approval, same day submissions. If I'm out with the flu, that's not happening, right? If you're out with the flu, that's not happening. So making it so that there's some buffer on payroll if you're doing that. Anytime I talk about payroll or these additional services, I do feel the need to say, you do not have to have your business offer add-ons. You can have a bookkeeping business that just offers basic bookkeeping. You have permission, and you can have even a six-figure business doing just basic bookkeeping. And that means coding transactions, reconciling, reviewing the financials, making sure it ties to the tax returns, payroll, whatever it is that they're doing. But you do not have to be processing sales tax, payroll, 1099s, things like that.
Yep.
I want to make sure to ask if they are okay with a virtual bookkeeper and if they're okay with using QuickBooks Online, if they aren't a good fit. Yeah, that's typically, you'll know that just through the nature of the conversation. So you'll notice we have a download for you guys today, that in that download, we actually don't ask those two questions. It is assumed. We are meeting with them typically virtually. We're going to let them know how we operate and that we use QuickBooks Online exclusively. But absolutely, if you feel the need to ask those, by all means. Okay, so some of the top categories we ask is we want to understand their business. So tell me about your business. What do you do? How long have they been in business? A few podcasts ago, I told you guys that I had this 3-3-3 rule. I developed it like 2 years in. And as they needed to have 3 years under their belt in business, so 3 tax returns filed. They needed to have at least 3 contractors or employees on some sort of regular payroll. And payroll, I say loosely, because if they're contractors, they're not physically on payroll, right? But we can group them in. And then they needed to have 300,000 in annual revenue. That was my minimum. So tell me about your business. How long have you been in business? And what is your current revenue range? What is your current financial setup? And Michelle, this is where you can figure out if they're open to using QuickBooks Online. Hey, we're currently using Xero. Okay. My firm currently uses QuickBooks Online. Are you interested in switching? No, I'm not. Okay, we're not going to be a good fit. And you can end the call there.
So after you've asked all those things, the next thing you're going to want to touch on is trying to figure out what they are looking for in a bookkeeper. What is their issues that they're having right now? We talk about this all the time. A lot of times, bookkeeping, either the potential clients that are reaching out, either maybe they don't fully understand what you can do for them or what you offer. And sometimes it gets confused with, hey, this is a CPA, or is this an accountant job, or can you do this? And there's lines on who does what and all those things. So that's definitely going to be one of the things that you're going to want to make sure that you're asking, is figuring out what is their frustration with their bookkeeping. What are they looking for when they say they're looking for a bookkeeper, and what are they looking for you to have done? Because some people, maybe it's just basic bookkeeping, coding transactions. Other, as Sherry mentioned, is going to be, might be some payrolls, accounts receivable, some things along those lines. So the pain points are going to be huge to really pay attention to. And you want to make sure that you circle back to those pain points and remind them like, hey, this is why you reached out. So sometimes it might be like, hey, I haven't filed taxes and I need reports to be able to do, or I'm trying to get a loan and I need these reports. So just remind them, and even in a follow-up, like why they reached out. So that's going to be super important as well.
Sometimes with pain points, they will start to describe their prior bookkeeper. My prior bookkeeper was always late getting me reports. And you can use that as an opportunity to go deeper. Like it's really sometimes easy to bash the prior bookkeeper and just be like, oh yeah, they didn't know what they were doing. He, she, doesn't really matter who, but it could have just been they were delaying getting reports. So we can start to ask about their processes. Oh, okay, I understand that tell me a little bit about that. Are you needing reports by the 15th, by the 20th, and go backwards? Okay, so I'm assuming like you had everything to her by the 3rd of the month, by the 6th of the month, like to make that happen. Oh, I expected we don't have this report available until the 15th. And I'm not even saying a credit card report, just we don't have this information until the 15th. So we send it to her on the 16th. And we were expecting, she was trying to get to the stuff by the 20th. And so she didn't ever have it done. Oh, okay. So with that information, it would be more reasonable for us to have it done XYZ date. Do you see how we backed into what the potential problem was? So it's not necessarily a bookkeeper issue, but we found out some very valuable workflow issue, like workflow information that impacts the expectations we set for the client. Sunshine says, I tell clients that there is not an amount of time commitment in the quote for services because I might need to use 3 hours this month to fix an issue, or next month I might need 3 hours to fix an issue. The prices for the service, I do have some services I bill at an hourly rate, but the monthly bookkeeping is not one of those services. Yep, that's great. That's a good way to, sometimes they know if I'm getting a really good client and they already know, like they already respect me enough, they know that I am charging a service, not an hourly rate. And I set that expectation when I quote them. But you'll have some, okay, how many hours is that for? And then that's where you have to like back in and say, oh yeah, and then say that, just like that. Okay. So we're going to figure out what their pain points, where they're going, what was their past history, what was their financial workflow. Is there any, because that's really helpful to know, like, how are they collecting payments from their clients? Are they using cash? Are they collecting cash? How does it get deposited? Who's tracking it? Do you buy expenses with cash? Those are some helpful things to know when they quote, because if they do have cash, like petty cash that they're using, we need to factor that in because we have to track it. And sometimes they haven't been taught how to track those cash transactions for true bookkeeping. So sometimes they'll be like, I took $20 out and that was to pay a contractor or to buy a tool from Walmart. The tool actually costs $16.50. So you have this extra money that like stayed in his pocket, right? We need to track those things because that might actually be a distribution instead of going into the expense. Okay, and after pain points, all of those things, we want to start to figure out what are their desired outcomes. Why now? If they haven't had a bookkeeper, why are they looking now? What's going on now that's leading them to change bookkeepers? What is their goal just with working with you? I have a client who just let me know he's got a new goal for 2025, and it changes the way I work with him in 2025. It's a big change, actually. Like it really does change the way we're working together. So that's something to pay attention to. And that will change for your clients over the years. And that can be the difference between losing a client and evolving with the client and becoming that advisor over as you grow and as you learn more things and increasing prices as needed. And then what does success in this relationship look like for them? Is that sometimes it's just getting reports every month. I have clients that don't talk to me like ever. They might ask me a couple of questions at tax time just because they're like, oh, I don't remember or know, or my tax preparer just asked me this. Do you know? Because they don't know who else to ask. And they're like, I hope she knows, but they don't have to talk to me. I have other clients that I talk to very frequently. If you're going to ask about a budget, their budget, towards the end of the call is a great opportunity to ask that. Hey, when are you looking to get started? You can also ask this at the beginning of the call. So on the download, you can get, I'll post a link in just a second, but on that download at the very beginning, I give you an option of when are you looking to get started with your bookkeeping services? Are you wanting us to get started now for February? Are you wanting us to start now for January and February? There's nothing worse than getting ready to do the engagement letter and being like, am I doing January? Is it done? I don't have it. I don't have access yet and having to reach back out. When are you looking to get started? And then do you have a budget range you're trying to stay into? I don't want to quote you for a service that falls outside of that. You had mentioned all of these other things. So I just want to be mindful of like setting expectations on what can be included in that budget. Do you have that range? I typically don't follow this. I don't typically ask that question. It's rare. It's sometimes when the client is like wanting the moon and back that it's like, what were you paying the other bookkeeper? What was she doing? Like, where are we at? Because yeah, I can do that. And I learned this early on, Megan. I don't know how I think you do something similar. At first I didn't. I was like, okay, here's the quote. It's $800 a month. And I didn't break out bookkeeping, AR, invoicing, like payroll, sales tax. And then I would have a client come back and be like, okay, can we lower the price? And then I would have to take off stuff, right? So you can either take off stuff or you can show them the price. I do still include like one price. So $800 and here's everything it includes. Because I don't want them to look at it and be like $800, $500 for bookkeeping and be like, ooh, can we take off? Like, no, you can't. There's a couple of things that you can do on the engagement letter side. And then the download in that Megan dropped for you guys, that is really detailed. So there are 63 questions. You can highlight the ones that are relevant. So if they're like, oh yeah, I'm not required to file sales tax, we're a service, we're in Arizona, we're not a photographer, so we don't have sales tax. You'll just skip the sales tax questions, right? But they're on there so that if they have sales tax and they're your first client with sales tax and they're somehow wanting you to do it, you can make that decision. If I will say for me, I don't file sales tax outside of one state that I'm hugely familiar with. I just don't. Like, there's no way for me to know all the rules of all the interstates, every like nexus, and did they meet nexus for this state but not meet it for that one, because they vary from state to state. So if you can use something like TaxJar or Alavera, if they have it and they are filing it, which would be preferred to me, you still have to reconcile it. You still have to reconcile those liabilities. So we still need to include in the quote the time it's going to take for us to keep that account reconciled and cleaned up, and everything on the balance sheet needs to be reconciled. So we have to pay attention to that. Okay, y'all got quiet on me. It's the day for that. I would see how it goes. If you haven't implemented a framework for your discovery calls, try implementing a framework. See if it changes how it starts going for you. See if it increases your close rate. See if it changes how you show up. And that doesn't mean you need to be like staring at like this piece of paper the entire time. You can have it up on your screen so you're looking at the client. If you're doing a Zoom call, if you're using a phone, like that's easy enough to do. And you can save it as a Google Doc and write on it, save it for that client. Learn if there's other questions you want to be asking. Like Michelle gave a couple of questions she asked. You can cross out questions you're never going to ask, things like that. So, but it's a really good start of getting the information you need to do a solid quote so that you're not getting in and being like, oh, this is double the workload I thought.
Yep.
Okay. If you want help on landing clients, quoting, all the things, like we often encounter bookkeepers who the reason their close rate is so low is their quotes are all over the place. They have no system to quote and to quote confidently. So they're like, ooh, you make $1 million, $1,000 a month. And they have no like reason to quote that. And I'm not saying that's a bad math, right? I'm just, do they warrant that? Is that what your service is? Do we have a rhyme or reason? As long as we have a rhyme or reason, we can show up with confidence quoting that. So we can help with that if you are getting stuck with quoting, how to price, all of those things. We can help you through the Bookkeeper Blueprint. All of those resources are in there. We can also help through those additional coaching calls, but we do encourage you to go ahead and get into the Bookkeeper Blueprint. That is where all of our coaches are. We answer questions. We have weekly calls with you, group calls where you can ask questions. You can learn stuff. I know I give a little bit of training on my call. The Thursday call is very much Q&A. So if you have any question, show up to that. And then Megan is also doing the mindset and book club. Is that one call together?
Yep.
And so they read through a book. If you're stuck on something and you're just like, I cannot figure out why I'm stuck here. I don't know why I'm getting all the no's, or I don't know why I don't want to go market. Get on with Megan. She's really good with that. Yeah, definitely read through it like it's an article first and see what's on there, because you might jump around. Like the client might be like, oh, hey, they might start out with sales tax. On that sheet, sales tax is towards the bottom. And so we might have to go make a note on sales tax and then go back up. So you want to be familiar with like your plan of action, even if you're going to take that sheet and kind of rework it into your own. Maybe you don't want all the questions on there. Maybe that makes your brain hurt. But we're definitely not just going to show up and say, what industry are you in? What is this? What is that? We really want to open that conversation, and we can lead the conversation with those questions. Ultimately, our goal is to find out those questions, but often listening is going to answer those questions, a lot of them. And then it's just, oh, you mentioned this. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And it's going to give you the other question. So it doesn't mean that you have to ask that question verbatim. We just need the answer. Does that make sense? And I promise I like triple read through them as I like reformatted it for you guys and really thought through. But I want to make sure that they're getting this information because of why. Oh, Megan posted it up above. Let me grab it for you. There you go. I promise the right clients are out there. All you need to do is to have the right process, right? So we're gonna be persistent. We are going to be very determined. We're going to be determined more than a kid in a candy shop to get those clients. And ultimately, it starts with those conversations. Conversations lead to these discovery calls. These conversations help us close those clients that are a good fit. You still might sign a client and find out later they're not a good fit. And you'll get better at. So what I used to do was I would look back anytime I either disengaged with a client or a client moved on. And this didn't happen very often, but I would go look at how did that initial call go? Were there what were those red flags? And I got to learn. How did I respond to that call? Did I have a gut feeling that I should have listened to that I ignored because I wanted the yes instead? You'll start to learn to trust yourself. And you might trust yourself from the beginning. I felt like I was really confident when I got started. And then I like went through a season of like, just maybe I shouldn't be doing this, and started underquoting and started going crazy. Okay, so we dropped a link to that download. If you want those questions, feel free to print it out, save it on your desktop so that you have easy access to it. Put it as a bookmark on your browser, have those as a resource, read over them. Definitely come up with a plan for your discovery calls. If, hey, now is the time, I am ready to start a bookkeeping business, or I'm ready to stop being stagnant in my bookkeeping business, the Bookkeeper Pro is likely the place for you. If you're wondering if it's the place for you, definitely ask us. We're happy to get on a call and walk through what that might look like for you, answer any questions that you have. Just let us know, send us a message, and you can do all of that by clicking on the link to the Fast Start. And then, as always, we're here every Thursday. You can listen to the replays on our podcast or our YouTube channel. Hopefully this was super helpful. Hopefully the questions is even more helpful to have as a resource. And we will see you guys next week.
Bye.
You guys.